company dedicated to enhancing leaders' ability to harness and optimize trust as a strategic business asset. The pathway to trust is universal. The fact that we all follow the same path to get to a point of trust, which I find sort of fascinating, and I'd love to unpack that with you. You willing to do that?
Oh yeah, I think it's true that there's a particular pathway that humans, all individual humans, as they make the trust choice, follow. And so I think it has a lot to do with the forms of trust that trust can take. So I think that'd be helpful to unpack the I think 4 different forms that trust can take.
So 4 different types of forms, and those go in a sequence?
Not particularly, no.
Okay.
They're not particularly sequential. They can be overlapping and continuous, and they can be present or not present at different times.
Yeah. But they're all part of this universal path that we take in order to decide whether to trust or not trust. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right.
Yeah, there's good debate on this in the literature, and I think even in the workplace, trying to figure out what do I need to consider when I'm trying to choose if I'm going to make myself vulnerable or not.
Yeah. So tell us, what are those 4 parts? What are the 4 pieces to the process?
Yeah. So it's always good to remind ourselves of what the definition of trust is. And so our working definition is willful vulnerability motivated by positive expectations. And so a form of something, it's a subdivision of a larger thing. And so trust is that larger thing. And then, so these forms that we'll talk about, they're discrete, they're conceptually discrete components of trust. And so we can, and I think they're also best understood as being experienced by the truster, the person that is choosing trust. It's their perspective and as they experience these things. So the first one is generalized trust. And then the second one is our interest. It's the object of our trust. What is that thing that we're interested in? And then particularized trust, that's our trust in a trustee, a particular other entity. A lot of times it's another person. Then one that a lot of folks don't really think about is categorical trust, or the context that your trust choice is occurring within. Mm-hmm. And there's a professor, Oliver Schilk, and he's done really great work in developing this out, and I really enjoy how he's done that. And so, yeah, we should definitely unpack these 4 pieces.
Yeah.
In the trust process.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Andrew Schilk. He's a professor that's really unpacked this idea of categorical trust, or the forms of trust in general.
All 4, yeah. Oliver Schilk has done a great job of helping us understand the 4 pieces, these 4 forms that trust can take. Mm-hmm. And also, I think, really opened us up to understanding, I think, categorical very well, because it's one that we forget about. We get these blinders on as we're in our trust environment, trying to make our choice. Like it's a really high risk. I'm not sure if I should do this. And then we're not seeing everything in our periphery that's going on in the workplace or whatever the environment is.
Yeah. Wow. This is exciting. So yeah, let's unpack. So generalized trust, let's start there. I mean, tell us the definition behind that and context.
Yeah. Also, generalized trust, it's our trustingness. Really. So it's about the truster. It's about our trustiness, and it's totally devoid of any context, any particular trustee that could be in our mind, or even any interest that we might have. So a lot of this comes from our genetic makeup and our early years of formation that develops, and then it kind of solidifies as we get older, unless there's some major crises of some sort that shift that general trustingness. So that's generalized trust. That's our foundation of trust.
Yeah. So this is really just sort of our foundation of how we look at trust. And it could be anywhere from highly cautious to more of a risk taker or welcoming risk.
Absolutely.
Anywhere along that continuum. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we start with our generalized trust. And then I think the next one you mentioned was interest. Second form.
Yeah. So you're living life and you have this relatively stable, depending on your age, level of generalized trust. You're just living life and you have different interests that pop in. Like, I want that candy bar, or I want to go on a date with that person. You have different interests, things that you care about, that you desire, and it's different levels of strength and intensity of those interests. And so we have to consider, how much do we want that thing? How strong is that interest? And then how does trust affect if we're going to seek to satisfy that interest or not, or to what level or what means we're going to use to try to satisfy that interest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I would imagine the next form that particularized is we go into exactly where that interest is and look to someone or something to make it happen.
Yeah, some kind of entity. If we can't satisfy that interest on our own, outside of others or other things, which we will if we can, because that's really low risk. But if we can't, which a lot of times you can't, especially in a interconnected network society that most people live in, well, then you look to other organizations, other individual people, something else to satisfy that. And a lot of times that takes the form of a capital exchange, right? I give you money, you give me the candy bar at the grocery store. That's a simple transaction. You get what you want, I get what I want. It's almost predetermined as to how it's going to go. Pretty low risk and a little bit of trust involved, but not a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when we need to reach out to someone, do we prefer that we could just do it ourselves? Is that more human nature oftentimes?
Some people are more social, so they enjoy there's value in the social process itself of engaging with others. Sure, there's value there. And there's other side value in making connections. So if you could have that future-oriented mindset, like, I want to build networks and connections for other purposes. So use this connectivity as a means to another future end. Mm-hmm. But there's also, anytime you engage with another entity, you're in less control of them or it than you are yourself. Mm-hmm. And so there's always a little bit more, if not a lot more, risk involved. So you don't want to have to if you don't have to. And if it's already something available to you in your resources that you have available to you, well, then you don't have to spend capital to get access or to get that other thing that you want. Mm-hmm. So it's efficient.
Efficiency, yeah. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about generalized trust. We've talked about particularized trust. What other forms do we need to do?
Yeah. Yeah. There's one more, right?
Trust, yes. And then there is a fourth. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the one that we forget about. We got the blinders on. We're really excited about that interest that we have. And so we're not thinking about anything except that. I got to have that thing. But there's something happening where you're engaging, whether it's a virtual environment or a physical proximate environment with another entity or person, you're engaging in a context. So if it's in your organization, there are other coworkers, there's other folks, there may be customers involved in the space. So it could be a physical or a virtual space, but there's other entities that you should consider for your own benefit to try to satisfy that interest. So they're not as important as the particularized trustee that you've identified to try to help you satisfy your interest, but it really does help you to consider those other entities that are in the environment that you're making the trust choice in.
Yeah, that's so fascinating when we talk about that context, because I think there is, and maybe it's for another conversation, but there's a big difference between when you're surrounded by your context on a normal daily basis and you're in the office versus now so many people are remote or in and out. And so how do you really ascertain, what is the context and how much trust do I need to put into that? So that'd be fascinating to unpack at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we should do that. And because, like you said, the continual context that we're in on a daily basis, well, we can take things for granted and then we don't see certain things because they're just expected and they just occur. Whereas if you're in a new international environment, you see everything going on. Mm. Everything is new to you. And so you notice things a lot more. So context does matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've got our four forms of trust. What might this look like in an example?
Mm.
How we do we quickly run through these four forms? Does it take a long period of time? I suppose it's all relative to the amount of risk, but what might this look like?
It's variable, even though there's these four distinct forms. It's variable as to the speed that it occurs. So you can talk about swift trust. Oh, swift trust is needed in this situation because it's fast moving, it's competitive. The pieces are dynamic that are moving the different people, the organizations. It's a merger, it's an acquisition, or sometimes it's lower. We know this environment. It is well organized and well controlled and ordered, and we understand how this process will unpack. But I would try to think like if you have a new product idea, say you're in it, you're in an organization, you have a new product idea. How do you get that product to launch? Well, can you do it on your own?
Likely
How
not.
trusting are you? So these are different components that you're going to either internally process or you might process with others. So you have a certain level of trustiness generally, but then you have this idea, I really want to launch this product. And then you're pretty quickly going to looking around, who can I do this through? Who do I have to do this through? If I can't do it myself, well, maybe you need to connect with your boss. Maybe they're someone who is critical component because the organizational structure demands you have to go through your superior to get things done. Okay, well, then you have your pathway.
Yeah. Well, I think this just underscores why trust is the difference. And what I see in terms of the work cannot be done alone any longer. It's so interconnected and so interwoven. The interdependencies are strong, and so trust is the difference. And the fact that we've sort of unpacked the pathway to trust is universal. What advice would you give leaders or listeners to really think through in terms of those four areas or those four forms? Do you
Hmm.
pause and think through that a little bit about how quickly you might make those assessments, or maybe how something might be an obstacle for you moving forward?
Yeah. So when you've identified your interest, try to understand for yourself how important this to me. What am I willing to risk in order to obtain this? You have to figure that out and be honest with yourself, and then be honest with what resources do you already have access to in yourself, and so that you don't have to risk. You want to minimize risk generally. A lot of people want to minimize risk. Some people are more risk averse than others. Some people thrive on risk taking. I get that. But in general, in the work environment, you want to minimize that risk and you want to be more efficient generally. And so so when you're trying to identify sources, particularized trustees to communicate with, to connect with, to partner with, to whatever it is to satisfy that, you want to think through this process for yourself. You want to figure out how much of a risk are they. And this is really where the ABI model comes in, right? That ability, benevolence, and integrity comes in. You're looking, once you identify a trustee, you're thinking, are they able? Are they benevolent? Do they have integrity? So you're weighing these things, that you're calculating these components, and maybe have five potential folks that you could connect with and try instead of just one. You're not highly limited. Then you're weighing these and comparing them against each other. You may not be thinking about you may not be openly to yourself thinking about this calculation, but you're doing it, and you have existing feelings, positive or negative, towards these particularized trustees as well, and so that factors strongly. You have an existing personality relationship, conflict with this one, but they're really the one you think is most able to get this done.
Mm.
Should I do it, or should I go with the easier answer of I like that person, and even though they don't have a track record of integrity of being successful in launching products? Well, which way do you go on that?
Fascinating. Yeah. Well, hopefully, this gives our listeners an opportunity to really break down the trust process and the recognition of not only ABI model individuals, how we're assessing that trust, but sort of the pathway to how we get to that decision. So, we thank you for listening. We encourage your questions, your concerns, your differing opinions, anything that you want to share. We're looking forward to hearing from you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.